I'm now about to do the repotting of the 5 trees that a customer brought to us. As I said, a lot of customers bring trees to us because they are either afraid to do it or they want it done by experts so that they don't make any mistakes in repotting. Although today is only the 16th of March, you must be wondering why this wisteria is in bloom. Normally wisterias bloom in end of April or the first week in May, and the reason why it's in bloom, by the way, this is one of the wisterias that we sold him about 3 or 4 years ago, is because he's kept it in his greenhouse. Nothing wrong with that. Of course, now that it's in bloom, he's got to keep it back in the greenhouse, because if you leave it out and we get a frost, it will ruin the flowers. So this tree is clearly in need of repotting. The pot is so small, the tree has outgrown the pot, and I dare say it is very, very pot bound. There are situations when, if a tree is so pot bound, you may even have to smash the pot because it just cannot come out easily. I have a feeling he's left this tree a bit late, or he shouldn't have put it in the greenhouse to get it so advanced, but it's not a problem. So again, I'm using the sickle tool. This is a sickle that we use for cutting around the roots so that we can get it out of the pot. I think these plants are probably weeds, so we don't need all of them. But this is probably not a weed. He's got some other interesting plants next to it. So let me cut around the pot like this. I always do this with all the subjects that I repot. Try and ease it out by cutting the roots that are attached to the side of the pot. This tool is very useful if you have incurve pots. As you know, incurve pots restrict the root within the pot, and very often the trees can even burst the pot if it's growing in an incurve pot. Now keep homing in close, and I'm just going to get another tool. This is a weeding tool, but I find this very useful for levering the plant out. So I've cut around it. I'll see if I can lever the plant out. And because it's not in an incurve pot, I think the chances of getting out of the pot are quite good. As I said, sometimes you get a situation where the tree is so pot bound that you've got to break the pot, smash the pot. Luckily, I don't have to do that. So there you are. I've got it out of the pot. Now, I'm not going to do the conventional type of repotting, where I have to tease the roots and cut up to, say, 30% of the root off. Because the tree is so advanced, if I were to do that, this tree is going to suffer. So I'm only going to tease the roots gently and then put it in a good compost that will be suitable for this plant. So again, let me find another tool. When it comes to repotting, we have 2 very useful tools for repotting. This root rake, this stainless steel root rake, this is very useful for most of the bonsai. So this is how it's used. For larger and more difficult trees, you can use these root hooks. This is a single hook. You get 2 hooks and 3-prong hooks as well. So these are useful if you have bigger trees. And I'm only going to gently ease the root ball, because the tree being in bloom, if I were to tinker with the roots too much, I may spoil the flowering. And I think if I put it in the right type of soil, the roots will go to the edge of the new pot. So I will just do that. I was once told that if you keep a tree fairly pot bound, it tends to encourage flowering. I don't know how far that is true. I've heard that said sometimes. And I've also heard it said that if you were to stress the tree so much that it thinks it's dying, the tree will send out flowers because it wants to propagate itself, to renew itself. Again, I'm not sure whether it is based on any scientific fact, but this is what people have said. And usually people, when they make these comments, they make it from some sort of experience. So that pot was clearly too small for this tree. Now let's try a couple of different pots. We've got these lovely Chinese pots from Yixing. Let me see if it would fit this one. I think this is better than the previous pot. So we could use this pot. I don't know which he would regard as the front. I think he would use this the front possibly. And then we could have the decoration this side. So that is one possibility. He did also look at this pot. This customer looked at this pot. Now these are typical Chinese type bonsai pots. They are not Japanese pots. Japanese don't often use colorful pots like this, and certainly not pots that have paintings and writing on it. So let's see what it would look like in this pot. When it comes to choosing the pot, it's not just the size which is important. Now in this instance, I want to use a bigger pot because that previous pot was much too small. I'm going to plant it a bit deeper because the graft is there, so it'll make it a bit. I think this is also in proportion. I have two lovely ladies here from Wisley, so they've got a very good eye. What do you think would be better, this one or the previous one?
I like the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think the scale is better, or not so gaudy?
Yeah, not so gaudy.
Okay, so I think I would tend to agree, because this one, if you have something which is too gaudy and too distracting, it can distract from the flowers. So why do you want to have two things competing with each other? So I will go for the less glamorous pot, or the less gaudy pot. Now this, by the way, is an incurve pot. So for the future, he might have a bit of a problem getting out of the pot. But that will be a problem for another day. So, and because it's incurve, I'm not that worried about tying it in. So I will just put those underneath and pot it up. I'm just going to say something about the soil. So if we stop the camera for the tying it in, because it's an incurve, and if I firm it up, it should be okay. Now let me just say a word about the compost. If you come close, this is our standard bonsai mix, which has about 30 or 40% akadama. Then there's the Japanese white volcanic grit, Japanese black volcanic grit, and then it's got composted pine bark. And then it also has a tiny bit of John Innes number 2 or 3. But let me explain to you why potting this wisteria is going to be different. At the bottom, I'm going to use this very free draining type compost. Okay, I'll put that first. But I'm not going to use this compost throughout the soil. I'm going to just put it at the base to help the draining, and the rest of the soil I'm going to use like a John Innes number 2 or 3. This in fact is an alpine soil, and it's like a sandy loam. I think I've mentioned before in other videos that I've done that fruiting and flowering trees prefer more loam, that means mud for want of a better word, in the soil than a very gritty soil. The very gritty soil is useful for pines and junipers because they drain, help the pines and junipers to drain properly. If you use too clayey a soil, pines and junipers don't like it. But because this is a flowering tree, I know from experience that this, not clayey, this is more like a John Innes number 1, which doesn't have masses of grit in it. This would help the tree to function better, and it would help the flowering better as well. I find that this trick that I use is really suitable for the fruiting and flowering trees as a rule, except Satsuki azaleas. I'll mention that separately. Now, crab apples, cotoneasters, and other flowering trees prefer to have a compost which has more of this soil in it rather than the straight akadama and grit, which I reckon is better for, I would say, most of the pines, junipers, and also the maples. Maples also like that type of soil. Although they will grow in a muddy soil, I don't like to call it mud, but for want of a better word, if you're a layman, you wouldn't know the difference between one compost and another. So this muddy type soil, like so, is better for fruiting and flowering trees. And this is simply from experience over the years. I found that this performs better. Soil does affect how plants grow and perform. So you've just got to try and experiment and see what works. And again, if you live in different climates, different countries, you will have to experiment with what is best for your particular situation. I often get, you may be reading some of the comments that we get from other YouTube followers, and they ask me, what is the best soil to grow this and that in? I always try to advise them that you've got to observe what local people do, because the climate is very important. Depending on where you live, the climate affects the drainage and the amount of rainfall you have. That also affects the way the plants perform. So what may grow well in the center of Japan or in the heat of India or the hot plains of southern China would not be what you would use in the cold temperate climates of the Western Hemisphere. And what grows well in California, the soils there may be different from what you would use in another country and climate. So bear in mind that there is no surefire formula for any particular type of plant. So from my experience, I found that fruiting and flowering trees like more of a muddy soil like this rather than a very gritty soil. So we'll move on to the next plant. Now this is a red maple called the Deishojo, although I notice in this customer's information label, he's called it Chishu. Chishu is also red. I wouldn't swear by it, but I think it is a Deishojo. And again, because he's been growing it in his greenhouse, it is much more advanced than trees that would be normally growing outdoors. So I've got to be very careful after repotting it. Continues to stay in the greenhouse. It's a beautiful, beautiful tree. Look at a lovely twin trunk here. And the cameraman here has just noticed and asked me, what is this thing around the rim of the pot? If we come close, he's put a type of sealant, you know the sealant you use for windows and doors? He's put this around the rim of the pot. It looks rather odd. It is like a mastic. Can you see? It spoils the look of the pot. And we asked this gentleman, why did he do this? And he said that because he saw the tree had been potted like this, the water wouldn't go in. Now, that is a completely wrong assumption. When you pot a tree like this, the water will still go in. You don't have to have a rim to collect the water. So he was just getting worried for nothing. Also, I have also said in other repotting and other care videos, if you have a problem with the water penetrating, you can drill holes into the soil, and that will help the water getting into the pot as well. So doing this, I've never come across this in all the years that I've been doing bonsai. This is the first time I've come across someone who's done this. Put mastic around the pot to raise the rim so that the water gets into the pot. No need for doing that. I think he's just getting worried unnecessarily. He hasn't had this tree for that long. I think he bought it from someone else. And I think he's had it for maybe 3-4 years or so. And it hasn't been repotted for the last 4 to 5 years, I was told. So let's see what the condition of the roots is. The pot is quite suitable for the tree. Nice oval pot. Although colorful maples are normally potted in glazed pots, either cream, green or blue, it's in an unglazed pot, which is unusual, but it's okay. You don't have to always have it in a glazed pot. A lot of these conventions about what color pot and what style of pot to use. Much of it is convention, but if it works for you and you like it, then well and good. You leave well alone. So again, you notice how useful this tool is. This we call a sickle, and it helps to cut around the limb, so it removes the roots which are binding the tree, which attaches itself to the edge of the pot, and hopefully by doing that initial cut like this, it makes it much easier to get the tree out of the pot. Today is only Wednesday, and in the 3 days or 2.5 days, Monday, Tuesday and today, I must have repotted about 20 or 30 trees. People who bring the trees to me always ask me to do it, although my staff are capable, but I've been doing it. And of the 30 or so trees, I think I've had to smash 3 pots because they were so pot bound, absolutely pot bound. There's no way I could have got it out. I tried drilling it and using a reciprocating saw around the rim as well, but they were so badly pot bound that they finally had to get it out by breaking the pot. I hope I don't have to do it to this tree, but sometimes many of these trees can stay in the pot for up to 10 years, I've found from experience, and they still are okay. And because this is not an incurved pot, I may not have so much problem getting it out. Usually the health of the tree is also an indication as to how vigorous the roots are. If a tree is growing well, which this tree is, there's only one small branch which is died here, and the apex is quite okay. While I see it, I better remove it. See, this is a dead branch, it's doing nothing. That really needs to come out, and I will seal it after that. Oh, there's another one here. Maples, by the way, you do get the odd branch dying from time to time, and it is quite a common phenomenon with maples. So you can't expect a branch to survive forever and a day. There comes a point when sometimes they do die, and it would be catastrophic if you lose a major branch, which again can sometimes happen, but it hasn't spoiled the look of this tree. Now, normally a tree of this size and complexity, I usually have an assistant with me. So again, you see how useful this tool is. I use it as a levering tool. But I've got to be careful not to lever it so hard that I break the pot. Sometimes if you get a pot-bound tree, you could be spending up to an hour just trying to get the tree out of the pot. So can you imagine the cost involved in doing that? The surface roots on this tree are pretty good. Maples usually produce good surface roots quite easily. I'm showing you every process to show you how tricky the whole operation is. Some trees are easy to pot if it's not pot bound, but this is very, very pot bound. Over the years, I found that I prefer to use pots which are more comfortable for the tree. So if this was my tree, I would probably use a pot which is that deep, about another 1/2 or 3/4 inch deeper, so that I give the roots a more comfortable existence. If it is pot bound too much, it can stress the tree. Oh, it's nearly coming. There we are. Okay, now let's have a close look at the root ball. It is pretty pot bound. Look at it. Very, very pot bound. Solid. So this is certainly in need of repotting. So you see what this root hook has done. I've managed to cut away all this with the root hook. So again, this is almost like a bird's nest situation. Let me bring my fellow secateurs. I'm going to cut away the root rather than just tease it, because this will have to be disposed of anyway. See all that root. So let me just reiterate and repeat myself. Why do we repot? Many people who are new to bonsai think that cutting the root is what creates a bonsai. No, cutting the root is really a process of rejuvenating and stimulate the tree into better health. Because if it was pot bound, it soon gets so clogged up that the roots cannot take in water and nutrients, or not able to breathe, so the tree would go downhill. And so that is the reason for repotting. So the repotting process is really a rejuvenation process. Look, that's all root. This is what terrifies a lot of people. The compost. This one, I think it may have been done here. I'm not sure if it's one of our trees. The trouble is we sell so many trees that I can't always remember whether it came from us. When trees grow in pots, the roots go to the edge of the pot and it tends to get congested there. But the tree otherwise is very healthy. Usually if you can smell the soil, and if it doesn't smell putrid or rotting, what we call it, is it not anaerobic or something, when it starts putrefying? Then that's okay. It literally is like a basket of roots. Look at that. I would say that it may be a shade late, but we just still caught it at the beginning of spring. Normally I would prefer to repot before the leaves come out, but this is still acceptable. Again, I'm not going to take much soil off. I think the amount I'm taking off is not even 10%. If I may repeat what I've said in a previous repotting video, because many books, I don't know which books these are, because customers tell me, oh, they read that you should remove up to 1/3 of the roots. That 1/3, not rule, or the advice of removing 1/3 roots is more, I would say, a maximum limit than I would regard as a norm. And again, I would use the analogy of your speed limits. If the speed limit is 40 miles an hour, you don't have to drive at 40 miles an hour. It's only the maximum speed limit. So if they say to remove 30% of the root, you don't have to remove 30% of the root. That is the maximum. In this case, I'm removing only 10% of the root. As long as I have room for new soil to be introduced, that should be okay. And because the customer liked the existing pot, I'm going to use the same pot again. I'm going to remove the soil from underneath. Again, you see how congested this is. And I certainly have never practiced this thing about jetting all the soil off. I've seen it done in Japanese instruction books and manuals, but usually in Japan, where they have a very humid climate, it would work there. But if you try to do it in this country, I think it's a bit dangerous. So I would not do that, jetting all the soil off. That means with a hose pipe or a pressure washer, they jet every single grain of soil off and then plant it up again. I'm not saying it won't work, but I think it's a bit of a dangerous practice. I've never done that, or those who have done it have not had much success. So if in doubt, leave well alone. I would commend this person who did the previous repotting, because the soil he's used is nice gritty soil. There are traces of akadama in it. So you can see how much soil I've taken out, not a lot, and I'm taking all that root from underneath as well. Now about to put the soil in, I always put a mound of soil so I can squash it down. I don't want to put too much because this is a very shallow pot. So I'll just put enough there and then I'll grind the soil down. Just stay there. So just to repeat, we tie the wires in just to stabilize the tree while the roots are getting established. And in fact, once the tree has stabilized, you can take the wires off. But we usually prefer just to leave the wires on till the next repotting. But because this is such a shallow pot, I think I've got to be extra careful that it doesn't come to any harm. So I've used quite a thick wire. In fact, I've used 3mm wire to tie it in. This is such a heavy tree. because the wires are visible, I would probably tell him to take it off after about 9 months or a year, by which time the roots should have filled the pot. And then the rest is just filling the soil around. Okay, I won't show you the boring part, we're just filling the soil. And then after that I will show you how we'll... So we've taken this tree Kiyohime out of its pot, and we can see that it is pot bound, so we're going to repot it. And if we just put it on the other pot, we will see the tree. It's quite an old tree with a thick trunk. Just a word about Kiyohime. This is a maple that many people are very fond of. But I was just telling our colleagues that Kiyohime is a very difficult tree to grow in the Western Hemisphere. Certainly in the UK, I found it very difficult. For years and years, we used to import Kiyohime from Japan, but they are not long-lived trees. So the fact that this tree has been here for quite a while means that this grower is doing something correctly. So we will just put it back, predominantly akadama, fine akadama soil, and that will be it. We will tease the roots out to see how pot bound it is. If you just start teasing, we will just see how pot bound it is. I'd just like to comment about the state of this pot. You see this lime scale you get on the rim. This is a very common thing when you use fertilizers. Especially I find that the liquid fertilizers are crystals which are dissolved in water. So if you use a liquid feed, I find that the liquid feed usually gives this chalky looking stain on the rim of the pot. So I'm going to take it to my kitchen and scrub it with a scarring pad and try and get that off. So when you repot, it's a good opportunity to clean the pots up, otherwise it looks ugly and untidy. This is a very common occurrence, especially with indoor trees, because people use liquid fertilizer on the indoor trees, and you get this white lime scale looking appearance on the rim, which is not exactly pleasant. So I'm going to clean this up. Well, we always learn something new. So my colleague here, Steve, he saw me reaching for the scarring pad, and he said he's got something nicer. So just show us what this is, Steve.
Just a polishing block.
Polishing block. So is this what we use also for sharpening tools?
Yeah.
Oh, so polishing block will do it. See how nice and clean, shiny it makes the pot. So it gets rid of that lime scale. So anything which is like a scarring pad or polishing block, this I think works probably better than the scarring pad. So I hope this channel gives you all sorts of little tips and tricks which you can learn, all for free. So there you are. You see how clean it comes. Thanks. So we are now just scraping the surface, exposing the root system or the nebari so that the roots look as if they're gripping the soil. The roots are not bad. That one can come off, that's going in the wrong place. But apart from that, the roots are reasonably level. They're quite good. If you put too much soil on top of the roots, you get this thing, you know, they grow from the top of the main roots, so that should come off. Okay. So Steve, you cut these two off and then start cutting the roots. In the last YouTube video that I did on repotting customers' trees, one of our YouTube followers commented that he couldn't understand why people, if they grow bonsai, they don't repot their own trees. Well, the answer is quite simple. Some people are just not confident to do it, and if they're not confident to do it, they don't want to kill the tree or ruin the tree, because if they have an expensive collection and they don't want to ruin it, it's better to get it done professionally. So that is the simple answer. So we are now ready to put it back in its original pot, and we're going to use predominantly fine akadama. We're going to tie the tree in. So there you go. So this is done. I'm not going to show you an exhibition shot, but that has been repotted. And then we have one more, which is the Satsuki.